Hi everybody, I'm Mark Bizzata, and today we are exploring how to build our knowledge of text and use this information when we are analyzing and interpreting what we're reading. First, we need to start off with a definition of what a text is. On its most basic level, a text is a set of signs or symbols that convey a message or meaning. What I like about this definition is that it really expands on what we might traditionally consider a text. For example, we have word-based texts like newspapers, novels, and websites, but there are also visual texts like oil paintings, movies, technical drawings, or bar graphs. And then finally, I have another category that I call the number and symbol-based texts. Some examples of these types of texts include formulas, number symbols, accounting spreadsheets, and knitting patterns. The important thing to keep in mind is that generally different texts fall into certain categories. If we know what these categories are and how authors use them, that's going to help us a ton when it comes to how we read them. It's kind of like trying to find your friend's house. If you've got a map, it is so much easier to find. The same is true with reading. If we know what the categories the particular text falls into, then it's so much easier to understand what the author's doing with that text and where it's going. For example, let's start off with two very common categories of text, fiction and nonfiction. Now we know nonfiction texts are based on facts in real life. Now inside that category, we might have another category of legal documents. And then finally inside that category, we might have another category that would be just rental agreements. So why is this important? Well, each category typically follows some basic rules. And how that text is created usually follows those rules. If we get into more specific categories, then usually we get into more specific rules. It's kind of like in biology how we have a taxonomy where we go from talking about mammals at a very large level and how mammals share certain traits, but as we dig down into more specific levels, like for example a red fox, then we can be more specific about the characteristics of that animal. It's the same with text. As we get more specific, then we have more specific information about the types of ways that the author uses that text and what we might expect from it. So what are we looking for when we look at different text types? One of the first things I do is try to figure out what is the author's purpose of the text. What is it that he or she is trying to accomplish with the text? Sometimes this is really easy to figure out, and sometimes we need to use some clues to determine it. Also, the more specific that we can determine what the author's purpose is, the more helpful it's going to be to us when we read. Finally, we want to make sure that we have evidence that supports our conclusion. This evidence can come from the title, the author's tone, quote, or even the word choice and rhetoric that the author uses. Here's an example from a sample ACT test that asks what the author's purpose is. Without even reading the passage, we notice a few things. First, the question is asking about a how-to text type. If we know some of the typical characteristics about this text type, we can eliminate answers A and B because neither piece of evidence would really support that the article is a how-to text. Although D is certainly a possibility, for me at least when I read this, it's pretty clear that answer C would be the strongest for supporting why the text would not fit into the purpose of a how-to article, namely because in a how-to article, I'm going to expect there to be certain steps that we typically see in these types of articles. And sure enough, in this case, we don't have those steps, and indeed the answer is C. So this was an overview of how we build our knowledge of text, why that's important to us as readers, and finally how we are able to determine what the author's purpose is in a text and how that helps us build our understanding of that text. Thanks for joining us. If you thought the video was helpful, hit that like button, share it with a friend. Go ahead and add your comments below, or you can always join us at thelearningframework.com for more resources and videos.